It is really amazing to see the many comparisons to the fall of Kabul with the fall of Saigon. And if you really take a look at both events, you realize that there's a stark difference in what happened in Kabul to what happened in Saigon. And I don't know for the life of me why these so called political pundits and media people, personnel, and these think tanks and all these intellectuals are trying to make some sort of comparison when there is no comparison. It's quite ridiculous to make the comparison. The events leading up to the fall of Saigon was starkly different to the events leading up to the fall of Kabul. In one case, in particular, in the fall of Kabul, the capture of Kabul was done, Kabul capitulated without one shot being fired, pretty much. Whereas with the fall of Saigon, there was from 1972 to 1975, the South Vietnamese army fought major battles to avert the fall of South Vietnam. A matter of fact, they fought battles when most of the time they were outnumbered, in some cases as much as 10 to 1. On top of that, they resented the United States negotiating peace treaties on their behalf that was not in their best interest. The leadership of South Vietnam had the will to fight, the army had the will to fight, and that only diminished towards the end when they realized that the air power or the air support by the United States was waning, and the financial aid was waning. Also, there was economic crisis that precipitated a lot of corruption among the officer corps, and that caused some sort of diminished morale among the troops. So those were the circumstances. However, in the fall of Kabul, there was no will to fight on the part of the Afghan government and leadership, as if the victory was handed to the Taliban. And of course, strategically, the Taliban, by deterrence, by overwhelming threat, forced the fall of Kabul without a shot being fired. Again, that's not a bad thing in the sense of a lot of civilian lives were saved, a lot of military life was saved, and a lot of human life on a whole was saved. And but in terms of military defeat, it was shameful. In terms of the diplomatic defeat, it was shameful, both for the Afghan government and the United States. So in the case of the fall of Saigon, it was understood. It was understood. There was major battles fought, and due to the strategic approach of the North Vietnamese army and the overwhelming support they eventually got from the Russians, they were able to overcome the South Vietnam. So let's quit, let's stop, and let's stop making the comparisons. As a matter of fact, in terms of the military hardware, the sheer amount of military hardware and conventional confrontation of armies that took place in South Vietnam to overrun South Vietnam is just amazing. None of that. I mean, you had the Taliban moving around basically with rifles and overtook the country. Okay? And you had people in armored vehicles running away from that assault. Okay? So that's a stark difference. Just militarily, that's a stark difference. Again, on the diplomatic front, it's a stark difference. On the political front, it's a stark difference. So with these three major areas of comparison, there is no comparison. It is ridiculous to compare the two. And if these are the people who come to the conclusion and tries to draw some sort of comparison, if these are the people who are advising the government, if these are the people who they're relying on as some sort of think tank, and God help us all. God help us all. And again, if you look at with the NVA, they only came to the negotiating table when they realized that it was in their best interest to do so. When they realized militarily they were losing. I mean, you had two major offensive bombing campaign by the United States, termed Linebacker 1 and Linebacker 2. That but all crushed the air defenses of the NVA. And that is when they decided to come to the negotiating table to buy some time to rebuild the defenses, which of course was strategic. And that pretty much upset the South Vietnamese leadership, because they figure they had the momentum. The momentum was on their side, and why would you negotiate when the momentum was on your side? And again, because of that mistake, that is why the NVA was able to consolidate their forces and then launch major campaigns against South Vietnam, which eventually led to the defeat of Saigon and the fall of Saigon. And America was all but out of South Vietnam when a lot of these events took place. And it was just left to withdraw, I mean, the diplomatic personnel and stuff like that. But in Afghanistan, the United States has just said they were going to retreat. And that was just, okay, you're okay. Whereas in Afghanistan, the United States just said we're going to leave without any condition. Now, I don't think I'm such a smart fella, but to me, one fundamental thing I understand, that you must have some sort of force, you must have some sort of threat to encourage people or warring parties to come to the negotiating table. If you remove that threat, if you remove that force, there is no incentive to negotiate. And even if you negotiate and that person or the enemy has the advantage, then you're negotiating from a position of weakness rather than from a position of strength. However, if there's always that looming threat and there's that looming force hovering over the enemy, then you can negotiate and you can come to a more reasonable conclusion, some sort of peace conclusion. Right now, there is basically no choice but to yield to a lot of demands of the Taliban, because of course they have the leverage in everything. So I don't know how it's possible to save face in that major military failure of the Afghan government, and a major diplomatic failure on part of the United States and NATO. It's very difficult to redeem yourself from that. However, let's look at the bright side of it. As we have said in one of the previous videos, there is no benefit to extensive, long campaigns. And now probably is the time to really get out of there. And hopefully there's some sort of peace and stability in that region, which sadly I believe that our enemies will, there's always opportunity. They will sneak in and fill the gap, and it really sends a bad message to friends, and it really sends a bad message to enemies alike. On one end, you're saying to friends, "Oh, I don't know if I can stick it through with you till the end." On the other end, you're telling the enemies that, hey, your power might be waning. You do not have the resolve that you should have. So it looks bad. Hopefully, there is redemption.